Professor.
They asked me a question about what was my experience. I said what it was, and they said, and I'm like, wait a minute, aren't you going to argue with me? Aren't you going to disagree with me? Every conversation was a competitive disagreement.
And we're live with Todd Davis, owner of the Harlem Wizards. Todd is actually very good friend. I've known him now. I think it's been about 12 years, right? I think it was around 2012, I think, around 2012, 13. What do you think?
Sounds about right. Seems like it's been longer because you've been out of in the other side of the USA, but
Right.
Yeah.
So, yes, I met Todd in New Jersey at one of the mini clubs. I think it was Thrive Fitness, and a gentleman named Nick owned it. And he goes, I got this guy that I think could really you'd be a good fit for him. And once he told me that you were, the owner of this Harlem Wizards basketball team, I was like, wow, that's cool. And at the time, I remember never associating. I thought you were like with a National Basketball Association, but I was surprised to find out Todd's organization has a really, really unique history and makeup and what their purpose is. And I'm going to just hey, Todd, why don't you share with our listeners a little brief summary of who are the Harlem Wizards?
So my dad started the Wizards in 1962. So as a little kid, that was the normal life for me, was going to Wizards games, riding with the team, hanging out on the bench, messing around before the game, doing the tricks, hanging out with the players. And that was my life. That was fun. That was usually my weekends. During the week I had to go to school.
Now, when you say doing tricks, explain to listeners, why are they doing tricks? Because
Well, we're an entertainment basketball team, and it was the idea. He always had this passion. I don't know where he got it from, but he always had this passion for the idea of merging sports and entertainment. So he did all kinds of different things. He had a clown baseball team called the Kokomo Clowns. They played in clown suits, clown basketball. He promoted boxing. He said the one thing he wouldn't do was wrestling. He said because it wasn't a real competition. He wanted to have the merger of both. So he gave up a lot of money on that one because wrestling's pretty big. But
right.
was always his vision.
Now
that was what excited him.
Tell listeners about how it's a very similar. Just basically, most people listeners are very familiar with the Harlem Globetrotters. So I like, explain that scenario in your mind and how he came about.
So the Globetrotters were the first. So they broke. It was one of these things where there was a couple of 2 or 3 at least traveling Black African American basketball teams that went around the United States, and people were looking for. There wasn't the NBA, but basketball was popular, not like it is today, but it was popular, and he always thought what they did was cool. And then the story he told me is what fueled him. 1943, I believe it was 43. He was stationed at Wright-Patterson Field in Dayton in the Air Force. And
wow,
there was every year they used to have a world championship of basketball in Chicago. And they were short a team. One of the teams had to drop out because too many of their players were in the war. And they asked him if he could put a team together. They gave him a week notice. So he put together players from the base, some college players he knew that had played a little professionally in the area. And first round of this eight-team tournament, they beat the Globetrotters. So my father goes to shake.
Wow.
So my father goes to, that's when the Globetrotters were playing serious. So he goes to shake Abe Saperstein's hand, and he gives him the cold shoulder. And my father said, from that day on, I wanted to find a way. And it just fell into his lap because a former Globetrotter, Goose Tatum, in 1959-ish, wanted to get booked in New York. He started his own team. He was the best, like the number one Globetrotter, comedian, and everybody said the guy was incredibly funny. So he booked him a series of games in New York, and it went really well. My father knew all the athletic directors of all the high schools because they had all played football for him, or baseball, or basketball. He said, "Do you guys
Oh
need
my
to raise some funds?" They said,
perfect.
"Sure." "Oh, bring it in. Let's do it." Went really well. Then Goose wasn't his health wasn't good. He had
Mm,
health problems, and next year or 2 years later or so, he said, "I could do it. We don't have Goose, but I can give you a show." And that was the beginning of the Wizards. And
that's
he was doing it
amazing.
on the side. He was selling insurance, which he hated, which gave him agita, but he had to do it. He
Sure.
had 3 kids, and he had to make a
Hmm.
living. But this what his passion was.
Passion project. So tell me, Todd, I mean, this is a great intro for our listeners and for me. So as much as I knew you and spent time with you, I trained Todd for a while, listeners, and in New Jersey, and that's how I met him. But now let's take a step back for a second because we're going to get to we're going to talk a little bit more about your dad at Wright-Pat because that's going to be very interesting to this Dayton, Ohio based podcast. So tell me a little bit, like, where were you born exactly? Where do you call home today? And you explain a little bit about your father's background. Tell us a little about your mom, or about where you were born and where you call home today.
Um, I was born in Far Rockaway, which is a beach town in Queens, New York. It's right between. People used to say, "Oh, you're from Long Island." No, 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 no. There's 5 boroughs. We're the last town. We have a train that goes, the A train that goes to New York. It's the last stop. It's an hour and a half on a good day, 2 hours on a bad day if you miss the connections or whatever to get on the
Mm.
train to get to New York City. Which, how crazy the world was as a 12-year-old. Me and my friends went to New York City to see the Knicks in the championship on the train. I
12
mean,
years
it was
old.
just 12 years old. Yeah. So, and my father was from the Bronx, and my mother, I believe, was from Queens as well.
Hmm.
And that's it. I grew up there. Now I live in New Jersey, similar to close to where I was when we met. It's a
Hmm.
little town called Cliffside Park, right overlooking Manhattan. I love that part of it. I work from home most of the time because we have a staff, but I don't need to. I'm doing a lot of selling, a lot of phone sales. So
Right.
working from home works great because I can do
Right.
Zoom, I can do phone calls like that.
I have to mention this to listeners because you did when Cliffside Park. It's amazing. Um, we were you put us up in your apartment during one of the hurricanes. Was it Irene or was it?
Oh
Was
wow, I
one of
forgot
those two?
about that.
Remember which hurricane was it? It was the first one or second one? I think it was the
It,
second. Yeah, the second one.
yeah,
And it was like, which one was it? I can't remember, but we were all freaked out. Anyway, I thought about the other day and I just smiled, thinking like we had our
wow,
2 dogs and everything. So
wow.
thank you for that. That's how good a friend my boy Todd is
You're
here. That
welcome.
took us overnight and we rolled through the hurricane. That's the hurricane that flooded the entire New York subway system.
Wow,
Would they say those figures of gallon amounts of water of that the ocean surge? It wasn't the rain; it was a surge. They said it was enough water to fill the Empire State Building,
wow,
or more, something like that. Anyway,
wow.
we're getting back. So was your mom like a homemaker, pretty much, or did she have any kind of?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yeah. And she definitely she did a little. She worked a little bit, but I think she came from the era where she believed from her mother that to work was for a woman was a failure. Like that meant that
Mm,
that was and I think that her. I mean, she did a little bit of work, and I think that's when she was the happiest because it's hard. It's hard, for some people. They got so much energy,
right.
and for a while it may be cool that they love being a mother, but they want to do more.
Right.
Once you get to that age where the kids don't need you every day, and she did some political work. I know she was on the campaign for Rockefeller, and I remember she would give out these little. She had all these little stickers and all these things, and she would go there every day. Um, and she was, and it was at the point that I was growing up. My siblings were older, and they left, and then her and my father had separated. So it was me and her. So she was a great encourager. She always believed, when I would get down, I would lose confidence. Oh, the kids in my class are smarter. I still
Mm,
remember the one time she said to me, Todd, I want you to put on some really your best clothes, and we're going to take another crack at that homework. And I still remember, like, the little things like that made a difference. They're silly, but whatever it is that gets you out of your head, you
right.
know,
Exactly.
yeah. And my brother was instrumental. I was in ninth. I was never a great student. I just, I'm not a bad student, but I just didn't have. It's been never had great confidence, so I would get down on myself. And my
Right.
brother one year challenged me. He's older than me, and he said, "If you get a 90 average, I'm going to give you $100." I stayed so focused, like I couldn't stay down because I wanted that $100.
You
That
were
was like that was a
yeah.
lot. That was like for a kid then. That was like 10,000 now or whatever with inflation. And I got a 90. It was the only time in my life I got a 90 average.
Listen, so
So was that
complete.
bribery or was that
Yeah.
incentive?
No, it was both. It was actual bribery, but the incentive was enough to, right, take you out of your own head and put your head to outside of yourself. And I complete so relate to that. Multiple guests I've had on the show so far. Uh, I completely relate, and I'm sure many listeners can relate to this whole thing of you got these ideas, you're spinning around, you're in school, you have these passions, and there's things buzzing around that all end up in going, okay, what do people think of me? What do I want to do? Who am I? And then, you're going to start to this be like that surface outside near you when you run across your peers and whatever. But thank goodness for your brother. Thank God. Is your brother, what's he into these days? That's it.
Right now he transitioned. He was a tennis addict. Loved everything about tennis. He's been to all the Grand Slams, and then he had unfortunately, he had a knee replacement that got infected twice.
Oh, goodness.
So they couldn't replace it. So now he's walking with he's got a bar in his leg. But he went through a bad experience with COVID in January and had COVID and pneumonia, and
Mm,
he's got diabetes, and so but we he transitioned. I just came from seeing he was in Daytona Beach at an independent living on the beach, and it's good. It's good.
hey,
He's got, I
okay.
don't know if he'll stay there or move, but it got him out of that little cave. He was in his house, what became his cave, and he wasn't getting out. And I was really
Oh,
concerned for
that's great.
safety and for socialization. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so
That's
Daytona Beach
socialization.
is nice. It's just it's
Yeah.
not like a huge this touristy area of the beach, but you could just go there. I had a hotel by the beach. Just walk out into the waves. It was like being home again in Rockaway, and you go in there and you feel refreshed. I mean, I was still working, so I go in the beach 5 minutes. I go for a little run on the beach, then I go in the water, and then I'm like,
Right.
okay, I had my vacation. Now I can go back. Between seeing my brother and working, that filled me up.
Nice. So, I have to mention that my family, we'd always go to Daytona Beach, and we actually stayed just north there, just across that line, across into Ormond Beach. And I don't know if you
Oh,
look, if you would look like north up the beach from Daytona, where there's a major lifeguard headquarters station. It's
oh no,
way
no, I didn't
it's
know.
it's just north across the border into Ormond. And it's so
Okay.
funny. We used to go there as kids, and I think my mom, my dad was a big body surfer, and I learned to body surf before I was on a cushion or a boogie board.
Wow.
And my mom was so concerned that we stayed at a hotel that was right next to the headquarters of lifeguard headquarters. So that I'm
Hmm.
pretty much figure, but Daytona's got a lot of things my heart.
Yeah. And
So
Ormond is beautiful. Like that is really upscale. I don't know if it was then,
yes.
but
Oh yeah.
I was shocked. I was like, wow.
Well, it's exactly it's just like one step away from where the Daytona, where all the college kids would come. So
Yep.
so listen. So let me tell you. Let me ask you. When you went to school, you know, were there any particular teachers that stood out in your memory, like that made a difference, or like experiences with you?
Yeah, well, definitely. Junior high school was interesting because my junior high was the teachers were great. High school was like a blur. We went in, we were like sardines, 4 hours in, 4 hours out because the school was too big, and you
Mm.
just go and pile class. And but junior high school was great English teacher, Mrs. Smurgett. She was not bad to look at either. I just want to say. Um, but it was she was great. And then college, I had a while. I took social. My major was sociology, and this teacher just had this like theatrical. He was British, I think. He was theatrical, and everything was just so interesting, and it just made all the material so fascinating. So those were two of my favorite. And then and then I met somebody in college, and I ended up I was searching because my mother had died
Mm.
in
God bless.
my like junior year of college, and it was just a shock. She had cancer. It was really quick, and I was lost at that point. And my friends had done, probably some of your listeners have done. It was back then. It was called the S training, then became the Forum, and they promise you a transformational life experience when you do it. And I went to this meeting at their house. They called it a coffee, and it was about 10 of us, and there was a leader, and they're talking about the program. And as soon as they asked me one question, they asked me a question about what was my experience of the evening. And I said what it was. And they said, got it. Thank you for sharing. And I was like, wait a minute. Aren't you going to argue with me? Aren't you going to disagree with me? I had never, I don't know what your life was like, but my life growing up, every conversation was a competitive disagreement. Your
Well,
position was not as strong as the other position. They were going to tell you why. It had nothing to do with this is my experience.
well, I'm gonna just guess. If anybody's ever been to New York or met a New Yorker, true, they they have opinions, and they like that interaction. I mean, that's fantastic. So when this was did you literally your junior year when your mom passed,
Yes,
you went to that organization? How
the,
do
the
you
next year.
the next year? Okay. And then I have a question for you. What made you choose sociology as your major?
I think I always was curious about human behavior. What would like why were we the way that we were? It was just something that it just I always I don't know why, but I always I had this questioning curiosity, and I would, you know, listen to facts, and I would listen to people tell me what was important and this and that, and try to
Mhm.
absorb it because you want to get along in life. But I would always say, I don't know. I think for people out there who believe in God, you might go, oh, but at 5 years old, I remember being in bed thinking about what if there is no God? What if we die and we're dead for eternity? And I would think about this as a 5 or 6 year old, and I had to find my way through that. And there was really nobody to talk to because my parents were like, just pray, everything's going to be fine. Go to temple. We're Jewish. God will be on your side. And I'm like, there's
So
something. Yeah,
So let me ask you, do you think, I mean, at 5, that's quite young. You really
yeah.
didn't have very many experiences. Maybe just the experience to have that question. I can only imagine. You let me know what you think. That you went to the synagogue or whatever, and you went through the motions, and to fire off that thought. What do you remember? I mean, at 5, to have that thought at 5. What
I don't
was
know
wrong with you?
where it came from, but I knew that I would sit there and think, man, I mean, I was thinking, man, I wouldn't be able to play with my friends. It would be over. There would be nothing. It was, I wouldn't be able to, see my parents anymore. And it was
Mm,
just, it was really sad. It's a lot. So I understand, why people have to find something, whether it's a belief in God or belief in something,
mm-hmm.
because we have, as human beings, we have this knowledge about our finitude, death. We know it. Animals might not be, aware. We are, and I think that's one of our keys to being able to be okay. Being okay with life is being able to find a way, whatever it is, to accept it.
This makes me think about I've been having mention this conversation to even my first guest on episode 1 with Ariane Kuhn. She's a social worker, and we talk about, she actually works with troubled teens and people with disabilities and people with autism, kids with autism. And one of the things I mentioned to her is like, this isn't just a theory, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, that I've never had children, but if this is a theory that I believe, because I'm identifying what you said at 5, because I had those thoughts multiple times through my life, I believe, along that nature, not questioning God, because I was raised Roman Catholic, and it gave me a great foundation. But I truly believe that children, um, the the goal or the role of parents is to try to just really observe. Obviously, they have to take care of them, shelter them, food, and all that. But observe when their eyes get light up. You hear these stories where the kids are into something and then it switches to the next thing. But I think it's that spark, that light, that innate, what you're talking about, that innate human being there that's waiting, has these gifts that are just, I think they're just God given. And then, right, that's the environment you're put into. Again, that's just a theory. After those teachers, and you're thinking of that. So, what was when you graduated? Did you have any experiences working while you're still in school, or do you get your first job? What was your first job like after school?
Well, my college. Well, first of all, I went to your stomping grounds where you were for a while, California. My aunt lived out there. My freshman year in college, and my brother took me on a trip to Yosemite National Park, which was I was like the funniest thing, how beautiful it was, but also when we stayed at a cabin that was outside of Yosemite, and it's the first time in our life as city dwellers that we heard silence. We just broke up laughing because we couldn't believe, like, oh my God, this is wild.
You're probably going, what is that? Nothing. I'm not used to hearing nothing. This is scary.
So that summer I decided to stay in LA. My aunt lived in Encino, so I worked at Bob's Big Boy on Sepulveda Boulevard,
Oh
flipping
my gosh.
hamburgers. So that was my first.
Oh
That
my
was my first
gosh.
job.
I drove past that place multiple times. That's a major
Oh,
strip.
really?
Oh, yes, for sure. Sepulveda?
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
wow. So
yeah.
you were flipping burgers, and was that experience humbling, making you want to think about something else, or was it fulfilling? And did you have anybody there that you met? You have any
All I could think about all summer was I didn't have the courage. Was this waitress that I really just was like infatuated with? So I wish I could. I wish I could have just told her, even if she said no. But other than that, it was great. It was just like it was cool. I'd ride the bus, go to my aunt, experience California. It was really cool. I really
how
had it was a good experience.
how long were you out there in California?
About 2 months.
Mm.
About 2 months, and then my first job was after college. My dad had stopped going on the road because before that he was a one man show. He did everything. He was the announcer. He was the driver. He was the guy who did all the booking. He handled the money. It was, he was very much old school. I will handle everything. You just go out there and perform. So, but he, you know, I don't know how oh, that's what happened when I did this, when I did that workshop, when I did S, I realized I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea. And the thought came to me, bing, we were doing some kind of exercise, some kind of that this was perfect. The opportunity of working with the Wizards was perfect. I could do my social side of it. I always wanted to make a difference socially. And then also that I really loved growing up around it and the vibe of it. And we could, and just, and it would just be, I could make a difference with him because he was a little hard in trusting people. And so, and giving up control. So as his son, that was an opportunity. And I wasn't even
Sure.
thinking about the future of the Wizard, like that I would save the Wizard. Like I wasn't thinking that they wouldn't exist because my dad had nobody to pass it on to. It was just, we had never talked about it. That was what was funny. He had never said, I want you to come in the business. And when I went to him, he said, sure, and I'd like you to go on the road so you can get the experience. So he had a
Hmm.
partner, Marcus Haynes, who ended up, he's in the Hall of Fame now. He had played with the Globetrotters. It was one of the greatest dribblers of all time, was phenomenal. And so I went on the road for a year and was the MC. And I had no experience. It was just,
Right.
I
Thrown
never
into it.
did that in my life, but it was just throwing me into the fire, and I did it. And we went all over the country, small towns, Missouri, and this and that. And it was crazy also because you didn't have GPS, you didn't have cell phones. You had to look at maps. Hey, it's snowing. Do you think the game is on? Well, I don't know. Let's go and find out.
Right.
That was
So,
and so
so going back, talk about he kept you out of your head, man. He kept you there, and you were like a conduit between right his players and like you're just there absorbing it all. And I wouldn't think you'd even have a moment to think be in your head because you're just so right in it.
well, when you're performing, because that's what you learn. You learn, like, it doesn't matter how you're feeling, whether you're up, whether you're down. You have a job to do, and your job is to go out and perform and bring the energy
Energy,
up and
yes.
bringing that up. And you can see what it's like, because when a performer is feeling good, it's pretty easy. And
Hmm.
if you're having a bad day, same thing, and probably in any performer, any actor, or anything like that, when you're having a bad day and you have to, like, put it aside and be in the moment. And I remember times where something was bothering me, and I would be just up the whole game. As soon as the game is over and I remembered what was bothering me, be right down again. But when you're out there performing, there's no room for that.
It's like a state. I experienced that I experienced that exactly what you're saying when I'm in the heart of a session with a client that's really doing well and it's very motivating, excited about what they're doing. I'm in that same state. I was in that same state when I'm speaking, doing a motivational speaking about what I find passionate, and I could tell the audience was there with me, and you're just kind of like in this zone. And then I also find that, which is that's probably why I do it so much, is that I play the drums and sing for leisure as both a challenge and kind of an escape of getting out of my head and just kind of feeling. But I know what you're saying. So you went on the road, all that type stuff. Was there, did you, obviously, was there any like, that was all very significant experiences. Was there any other, during that time with your dad on the road, was there any other life, like really significant experiences that like said, oh, I'm definitely doing this, or how'd that play out in terms of,
No, no. As a matter of fact, it was a rough year because there was controversy where Marcus had his players, my dad had his players. There was some kind of nefarious things going on with where
mhm,
Marcus felt that the team should have been his at that point, that they had some kind of gentleman's agreement. And my father had a different understanding. It was a crazy partnership. No papers signed, shake hands, that's it. So
How long
it
did that
was it
last
was
with that handshake with those two guys, to your dad and
about
yours?
about 2 years. So I was going to quit in the middle, but I wanted to see it through that year. By the way, the funniest thing that happened that year was we had a player who's still living to this day, might be the tallest person in the United States, 7'8". This guy George Bell. He became a sheriff in Virginia. So the one time I introduced him, and I go, standing 7 feet 8 inches tall. Let's hear it for George Bell. What I didn't notice was that he had a little bathroom break. He hadn't made it out. I missed. I was looking at my papers. I didn't see that 7 foot 8.
Wait, so then didn't he come walking out after or whenever you got finished?
Yeah, yeah. I said, well, he'll be out in a moment.
Wow. So I mean, obviously, you mentioned the teachers and stuff, and obviously your brother was there at a time and being like just stand up noticing something about you enough to, that's awesome. Your dad. And then right, so you had like these, was there any other people that stood out besides your dad and in terms of like a mentor type situation that affect your life, or like once you got going with your dad and then you obviously you take over the
Well,
team,
it
but
was yeah, it was definitely the seminars because it was funny after I did back then, which was asked in the form. I did a lot of volunteer work because I really
hmm,
believe they that's what they had. They called it. They had volunteers, so they had a staff, but they would promise you, hey, you get to make a difference, for other people to go through the program, and you also so I did different jobs that really I didn't realize it, but these things were the greatest training for when I would run the business because I was the youngest child. I got everything handed to me. I didn't even have to make my bed. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't know about responsibility. I didn't know about you know my parents gave me a lot of room to
hmm.
be a bad boy. They would
Well,
yell and get angry, but I learned so much. The first one was I did this thing called the seminar phone campaign where we would ask people if they'd like to register, and I had never done sales in my life, nothing. And the first thing he taught us, the guy Werner who started it, who was a brilliant guy.
uh-huh.
There was a lot of stuff about him, some positive, some negative, but the negative, like Scientology was trying to kill him because they did. It was a whole crazy stuff. But basically, the one thing that I remember, first of all, we had fun. We would have these meetings. Everybody would get up. We'd have a theme for the night, and we'd get all motivated and have fun with it. But he said, just remember when you're calling somebody, you're intruding on their space. You ask for permission. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know if they have time to talk to you.
Hmm.
You're intruding in their house. Maybe they think it's somebody's dying or something. They may hear the phone and go, so, you ask permission. Hey, can I talk to you about this? And
Right.
that was game changing because I felt comfort then because you're asking, you're requesting, you're not, and that really helped me when I went into sales because it just doesn't seem polite or nice or workable to just, hey, I want to sell you this product. Give
Right.
me, yeah, without
And
even asking for permission.
it's like it's almost like just common courtesy 101,
Right.
and to basically like, yeah, can I ask you, can I tell you about this, can I ask you some questions, or right, and that permission. And it, to me, it sounds like I get from it where you talked about where your young days and kind of the youngest child whatever and running wild, and then that combined with that natural instinct that we talked about earlier, um and that work, it seems like it was kind of like a created just a really nice flow for you, That's what I mean. That's what I'm hearing,
Yeah,
and obviously you've been successful at most
yeah,
everything you're doing, and obviously there's a huge passion. That's awesome.
yeah. And when I came back, what happened was I think it was about a year. I was just figuring out what I was going to do next. I left,
Hmm.
so I got a job as a waiter, which was great because you really see what that life is like. You really appreciate like, and I go in a restaurant now, like I
Sounds
appreciate,
humbling. Yes.
yeah, and I still remember, and I'd work, and then I would come up with all this cash. It was like, wow, this is great, and people would ask me, what are you doing for a living? I say, I'm waiting, and then I went to him and said, I think I would like to work. He had dissolved his partnership with Marcus, and so but he was not doing a lot of games. He had got that really depressed him because I think it was a really unfortunate situation because he really admired Marcus. He really liked him. He thought their
Hmm.
partnership, but I think Marcus, my personal opinion is Marcus had baggage from his experience with the Globetrotters and Abe Saperstein and feeling that, you know, he didn't treat him well. And so, the next white Jewish guy that he dealt with happened to be my father. So I think he was
Mm.
taking out what didn't work out with Abe on my dad. And my dad was completely opposite. My dad was like, let's make this work together. We're a team.
Right.
But he had just too much baggage, I think, from that experience and was bitter because Abe didn't do him right. He should have been in the NBA. He didn't let his contract go. He made it difficult,
Oh.
and it was
Mm.
just sad in that respect.
Right.
So he said, I'd love for you to come back. I don't have any money to pay you. You'd have to sell. And so that for me, that was the most uncomfortable, probably one of the most uncomfortable experiences I ever had. The fear I had, the talking to myself about, oh, what are they going to think? Do they know that I'm not really an athlete. I'm not really confident. I'm not really this. And this is all going on in my head while I'm
Right.
making the phone calls. And my father's lesson was just dial the phone, just dial
Yeah.
the phone. And then I got the lessons from the seminar phone campaign about some of those, tricks of the
Mm.
trade. And then
Right.
once I started getting results, it was all cold calling. We didn't have any marketing budget or anything. It was just
Sure.
we had a little book that said coaches director, call them up. There was no other way to reach them, or
Yeah.
you could send a piece of mail. That was about it.
And
And
if you're cold calling, you're like, you better be polite because like, hey, what do you want? If didn't
yeah,
happen to answer the phone, right? That was the only link.
yeah.
There's no other
So
way. Like,
eventually, yeah. So eventually started getting results, and then I started doing less days waiting, and then I transitioned, and then after that, other than the fact that me and my father fought about everything, it was great. No,
once you,
actually, it was just, because I felt too comfortable. I didn't have any restraint, so it was great because I could make mistakes. But he fired me 4 or 5 times. I mean, it's really, like and that's probably understating it. But I was fortunate. 2 years before he died, I had seen a therapist, and I was going about something else, going about relationship. But
hmm.
she knew what I did, and she knew me. She was actually friend. I think she was related to that couple that I had met when I went to school in Albany that I did that workshop with.
Hmm.
And she said she knew my background. She said, "So how's it going with work?" I said, "Well, we're fighting a lot, me and my dad." Da, 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 da. And she said, "Who's the boss?" I said, "Well, he's getting older. I'm doing more of the day." She kept going
Ooh.
round and round in a circle, and she said, "So who's the boss?" And I said, "Well, he is." She said, "Well, I got one piece of advice for you. Forget that he's your father at work. Treat him as the boss. Give him that respect, and your relationship will change." And I took it to heart, and I did that. So for the last 2 years of his life, if I disagreed respectfully, and I said, "Are you sure?" And it transformed everything.
Nice. That's great. That's just great. I mean, there you go. something I mentioned on the show about why, I talk to a number of people, and you're one of my many clients that I talk to people, and here in Dayton, and people I meet and have known forever. I go, listen, I want you on my podcast. They're like, what would I have to offer? And I said, you know what? There's a nugget somewhere. If people listening here to this podcast, I'm trying to emphasize this, that, we're each of us are basically amazing human beings with gifts. And when we have a platform now in this modern technology, we can get an opportunity to share something about our growth experience, our lack of confidence, our building blocks, the people who made a difference. I think most of my listeners can relate to that. I can relate to it. This is why I started the podcast. So any profession, any background, any person, status doesn't mean a thing. So I think there's nuggets to be found here, and you never know when you listen to somebody talk and you're at a place in your life and all of a sudden a bell goes off. So I believe that's how powerful Imagine Fitting In podcast is going to be. And I'm hoping that to help support the potential of changing lives and supporting especially our youth in this culture and in day and age. Now, I have to go right to your dad's history in the Dayton area, because it fascinates me when you first mentioned it. What else can you tell us, about your dad's history at the base, what he did at the time, and was this before you were born?
Yes, yes. Matter of fact, when I was cleaning up for my brother, I found love letters that he had sent to my mother from being stayed. He said, "I haven't heard from you in 2 days. I get worried when I don't hear from you. I miss you." And I never saw that part. So that was an awakening for me,
Oh,
because by the time I was born, they were on the fritz. They didn't have that
mm,
warmth, was it, and love was overtaken by hostility. And so seeing that was amazing. And so what at Wright-Patterson, because my brother had been born in that period, so he would ask questions about how's Alan doing, and he must be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see him. And but he was in charge of recreation, so they had morale, welfare, and recreation. So he did all the sports stuff, and he did all the programming. And the crazy thing was, he got
what,
promoted to be drill sergeant, but he never went through basic training. He might be the only one. My father was great at talking his way out of stuff and talking his way into stuff.
it
He
sounds.
didn't want to do he didn't want to do basic training, so he found a way to be a drill sergeant without doing basic training.
So now what? Okay, so how long? What again? What years was your dad at
I think it was like 40, 42, 43. I'm not sure, but I think about
Wow.
2 years.
And then at
And
that
he
time,
was about to go out. I think he may have been on the water when the war 44. I guess when the war ended, and they said, no, turn back, it's over, the war is over.
hmm. Oh wow. So let me ask you. So so at that time your mom and the rest of the family or whatever was still back in New York.
Yes.
Okay. And wow, that's very interesting. It's great. So like I want to ask you what is your earliest memory of the team and your father that stands out as, was there any one impactful moment that, like, all of a sudden you find yourself, you're with your dad, that kind of peak realization that you're like, wow, this is something special.
um I think I don't have like the first, but I just remember I'd always look forward to seeing it. It didn't matter how many games I went to. So I can relate to the kids now, because I was that kid, and I was that kid 100 times over. Like, if you told me there was a game every day of the week that I could go to, and it's a similar show, it's not that different, I would say, of course, yeah, let's do it.
Right.
But I did at 6 years old. I remember that for some reason this one stands out. So my father would introduce this player as the greatest player in the world, and literally a case could be made for that. He had been banned from the NBA because they said he was in communication with a known gambler. There was never any
Oh.
proof of him doing anything wrong, but back then there was no process for going through it. But Connie Hawkins, the Hawk, he's top 50 greatest of all time. So I remember playing one on one with him at 6 years old, and and I'm making moves on him. He's letting me score, and I beat him, and he's like high fiving me. And so
And
for some reason that what
what was his name again?
Connie Hawkins, the Hawk.
Connie Hawkins?
Yeah, and definitely one of the greatest players from Brooklyn, one of the greatest players out of New York, and he's top 50 greatest
So
in NBA history.
what year would that be?
That was about 1960, 64-ish.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a really great memory, and thank you for sharing that. So,
and yeah, and my dad also, and just later on, like just when I was a teenager, he wanted me to experience the world, and he couldn't. He didn't have the resources to go on family vacation. So, okay, we're going to Israel. I want you to come,
whoa.
but the only way you can come is you have to play against the Wizards because they're not going to give me extra tickets. He talked his way into it. It was it was like a passion for me. He's always wanted to go to Israel and be a part, and experience that. And it was just the whole, hey, we'll invest. And so I went and played against the Wizards
So you
at
guys
15 years old.
15 years old, so your dad took the show to Israel.
Yeah, and we walk into the
Amazing.
arena. So, okay, so here I am. I didn't even play on my high school team. I played at the Y. I was a star at the Y. Let me just tell you. I averaged 20 to 25 at the Y. But when I got the tryout for the high school team, I found out that I just didn't have the chops for that. So we go there, and they bring us to the arena right before the game. That's a tradition there. We walk into the arena in Tel Aviv. There's 10,000 people there. I was so nervous. I didn't know what the hell to do. And crazy thing is that the Wizards scored. The media was there because it was late. So the media wanted to get a shot of the Wizards and shot of the New York Stars. That was our team. So I get the ball in the corner, and somehow, I was so nervous. I don't know how I even shot the ball. My arms were like this. Boom, swish from the corner. I'm all over the news in Israel.
That's awesome. Wow. I mean,
Yeah,
that is just priceless that he was able
yeah,
to get you that
yeah,
experience, and that kind of experience on top of it. I mean,
yeah.
we could call that a definitely game changer, wouldn't you say? Wow.
Yes,
Wow.
yes, yeah.
Now what were the most important lessons did you learn from your father about basketball, business, and especially the entertainment factor in regards to the having a Harlem Wizards experience?
Number one by far, because his it was by far nothing even close, was his passion for giving people an experience that was intangible, incredible. Like you walk away smiling, uplifted. It's fun. And that was it. And he didn't care. He knew when guys were not bringing it. Like he didn't hesitate. It didn't matter how big the crowd was, how much money they made that night, or it was like, you guys didn't didn't bring your heart and soul to the show. That's unacceptable. He didn't care if he missed a shot, but just if you didn't have the right energy, he knew. And that's what I learned. And I think that's why the Wizards still exist, because a lot of teams have tried this, and
Hmm.
it's a hard business, going on the road and
Sure.
the expenses and managing players and, just figuring out, like, a lot of teams have gone in and gone out. But I think that was the difference, is that he believed that that was the one thing that makes this thing special. is the experience you're giving people. And if you're not, you're just cheating. You're just taking money. You're just looking at it as a way to make money. And
Right.
of course, you want to make money. You want to live and all that.
Right.
But if you don't have that, your integrity's out and you're cheating.
It just goes to show you, like anything, right? If you're passionate about the subject matter or what you're trying to provide, if you're knowledgeable,
Yes.
if you know how to pull it off, and that content is what any customer wants to know, that it's coming from a good place, sincere. There's no question that you're trying to be manipulative. And that I think it was pretty much a genius of your father in terms of a business side, because economics is economics and hard times are hard times. But to be able to have people that are experiencing those hard times, be able to, like we mentioned, the experience of just being able to step away and escape their normal lives, and him focusing on the continuity and consistency of that product and that quality of entertainment. Everything else comes the rest, right? That person that doesn't want to pick their phone call up to, to try to be sold a experience. The timing is not quite right or whatever. But that's just, I think that's gold. And I think that's a great, great lesson for not only just people that are trying to start a company and business, but to maintain it and to, grow it through. I'm a firm believer that, and I am a firm believer that content is everything, sincerity is everything. And I'm hoping that Imagine Fitting In will grow because of that. So I thank you for sharing that. And,
Yes.
doesn't sound like they don't make many guys like your dad anymore, or at least you don't
Right.
hear
Yeah.
about that up front.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you
He
know,
was. Yeah. It was like, I don't know. I never asked him where did that come from. But he had it. I don't know where it came from, but it was one of those things that's non-negotiable. There was other things that were a lot of things that were negotiable, but not that. That was the core, and when I looked at it, what kept me interested was that also,
mm,
because I could, it was real. Like it's funny, like when you say, well, it's intangible. What's the difference? The two nights looked almost the same. Well, yeah, but that night they just did that. We didn't care. We were off. You could see the difference because you just can feel it. Like maybe other people didn't feel it. I don't know. You can't always tell, but
right.
and when the team is off, and when they and part of it is like what you were saying, like appreciation, like that they really appreciate to be great at this. You have to appreciate that you have this opportunity to be the fun self that you're really being who you are, but you're exaggerating a little bit, but hey, I like to be fun loving. I like to go have fun. I like to see people laughing. I like to see kids smiling, and it's part of who I am. And it gives
Yeah.
me, as a player or as a performer, it gives me that feeling of it's worth it. This is a job worth doing. We're not
Mhm.
saving the world. We're not doing, you know,
Right.
something like, like somebody in a hospital, but it is a real benefit because you're sharing this connection, this love, this joy, and
Great. The
that's
experience,
the beauty of it.
yeah, that experience of that now moment when you're among, right, a group of people in your community. So listen,
Yes.
what keeps you excited about inspiring a team to inspire the young people these days?
Well, I think I'd have to say the number one thing is uh, the team of people around me. I like so. For instance, during COVID, there was five of us. My nephew's now in the business, third generation. He's the sales manager. A couple of the players have been with us. One 15 years, one 20 years, one just retired after 25 years.
Oh, wonderful.
Both of them played with the Globetrotters too, so they had the resources of that experience. But was is just I have an office man who does all operations. He's brilliant. His dad's a rabbi. It's just like we got it going from all directions.
Okay.
And so and now I have a new person who's our travel manager and player manager, kind of like interactions with them. And she started with me 11 years ago, and
Mhm.
4 years she was my office manager, and then she went on to become a lawyer and did that for 7 years. Now she's back. And
Nice.
so the joint commitment where I'm not like that. So during COVID, we created a new program, and that all came out of, we didn't even plan it. It was just the guys wanted to do something for the kids. So it was this program where we called it WizFit P Live, which was basically kids could do a workout at home with the
Mhm.
Wizards on Facebook, on YouTube. So
Sure.
they were doing it just for fun. And one day I'm watching it and I go, they just created our next program. They don't know it yet.
There
And
you
so I
go.
went to work, did the behind the scenes stuff. Then I brought it to them a week or two later and said, we're turning this into a program. You guys. And it was just that shared commitment. I think for
Yes.
me, that's what keeps me going, because the creativity, the commitment, the love of it, and the entrepreneurship of creating with other people, and there's the trust is there. We
Yeah.
completely trust each other, and we believe in each other, and we can. And when we don't like something, they can say, "Todd, that idea sucks."
Well, you know what, Todd, it sounds like um, you have just a combo of the foundation, Price's foundation from your dad, the experiences, all those with those fantastic players that affected you within that organization while you were cruising along, impacted probably so many young lives in so many different directions and gave so much joy. So I just want to thank you. It's just awesome. It's just a great story.
Thank you.
You've been a great friend and truly an original. So I thank you for that. I thank you for spending time with us and on the show Imagine Fitting In. And I have a feeling that we're going to be talking to a lot more these days. Um, and again, thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure the listeners now know much more about the Harlem Wizards, and we're going to definitely have all your contact information in the show notes. So, my friend, thank you.
I forgot one thing, Greg.
Yep. What's that?
Anthony Grant, who is the
Yep.
coach of University of Dayton,
Mm-hmm.
played for my father a team in the United States Basketball League called the Miami Tropics. And that was a big league in the summer before the G League and the NBA Summer League. And that team won the championship. And that was my first year taking over the Wizards in the summer when we were visiting camps.
Yeah.
And he was down there running the Tropics. And Anthony Grant was, that was an incredible team. It was like guys who ended up playing the NBA after that. He went on
Nice.
to be the coach. I heard he's really doing great. University of Dayton, and even some of our players know him. So it's like the third degrees of separation. We didn't even know we all knew the same
That's right.
guy. So
Right. Fantastic. Another Dayton nugget for the Dayton area here. So
yes,
thank you again, Todd. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll talk to you again. I'll see you soon. All right.
thank you
You
so
take
much.
care.
Thanks for
All right.
having me. All
Yep.
right.
You're welcome. All right. See you, kids. Till next time.
Yes.
Professor.